My name is Dee Roberts, and I'm the Reference and Outreach Librarian here at Pitt's Theology Library at Candler. And I have the privilege and honor of being the supervisor for this Morgan Fellows program that we have. So welcome, good afternoon. Hello to all of you in person, but also greetings to all of our virtual friends joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome you to this year's Morgan Forum, That the Scriptures Should Come to Light, William Tyndale and 500 Years of the English New Testament. Today is a special occasion on which we gather not to just exchange ideas, but to recognize and celebrate a remarkable group of individuals, our Morgan Fellows. Sharing his collection with those both inside and outside of traditional academia was a value of Michael Morgan's. He often would open his home library to students, giving them an opportunity to engage closely with the treasures in his collection. And that is the spirit that is embodied in our Morgan Fellows program. The Morgan Fellows program is a 6-week primary research intensive opportunity where master's level students dive deeply into a self-selected item from the J. Michael Morgan collection. Our fellows come from diverse backgrounds and represent both Candler School of Theology and Columbia Theological Seminary. What unites them is a shared drive to ask important questions, to listen deeply, and to contribute in ways that extend beyond themselves. Ayodele, John, Kwan, Sergio, and Tina have spent the last several weeks engaging in the work of provenance, tracing their items through time and space to give us all a glimpse into the stories behind how these 8 items came to be and why we should care about them now. They've learned the skills of creating descriptive metadata, creating infographics, which you can find in your folders, and they have also gained tools for giving engaging presentations and how to narrow scope and focus when there are just a lot of rabbit holes that one can dive down. So the Morgan Forum stands as a space for thoughtful dialogue, fresh perspectives, and meaningful connections to the past, present, and future of the Bible. At its core, it reflects a belief that scholarship is not just about achievement, but about curiosity and courage to engage with complex challenges. So I am excited for all of you to learn from this year's cohort and to be challenged by them, and to see how they weave the stories of relevance for items compiled long ago. To everyone here today, thank you for being part of this year's forum, for being here to support this year's fellows, and for continuing to help us foster a space where ideas and learning can flourish. So without more yapping from me, I am honored to welcome our 2026 Morgan Fellows.
Okay. My name is Ayodele John Alonge, a student at the Columbia Theological Seminary, doing a master's degree in practical theology. I'm a first-year student, and my focus is on educational ministry. Before I start my presentation, I want to appreciate the Pitt's Library for this support, for this opportunity, and also Columbia Theological Seminary Library, which we have the leadership here also, and the archives, for giving me this opportunity to stand here today. When I first came across this book, the Bible, 1767 Morgan book, the book of Psalms, I noticed what many might initially observe as a very small, old religious book from 18th century. Very small. As I began to research on this book, the more I spent time on it, the more I realized that this Morgan Psalm book demands that I should study it and read it in 2 ways. Number one, I should look at this Morgan book about what is written in it, how it was printed. Also, it demands that I should also read and study this material based on the stories written on it by time, by use, by the ownership, the neglect, and the survivor. That, for me, is what makes the copy very compelling. It is not just a devotional book, that psalm, as you can see there. It is a living historical witness. In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate, based on the research, how the Morgan copy of 1767, the psalm books matters, not for the content, but for what it has endured. Full title is The Psalm of David with 10 commandments, creeds, Lord's Prayer, catechisms, confession of faith, liturgy. This book was translated from Dutch to English, and the purpose for the use of Reformed Protestant Dutch Church of the city of New York. The book was printed in 1767 in New York by the publisher James Packer. And the purpose, as I said, it was intended to use for worship and Christian education. Because these psalms in this book were written in meters. So in view of this, the purpose of that is for singing, not just to read like poems or like we read the Bible, the psalms. It were meant to be used as daily faith devotional, and for singing, for prayer, for memory, for theology, and also for devotion. And from the start, when I saw that book, the use, you can see, the book is meant for use, and they really use that book. It's not meant to be on the shelf. The translation also from Dutch to English connects to the broader history. The book was created during the time when language, migration, religion were interconnected. These people, they are from Dutch land, they are in New York, and they want to continue with their tradition, using their book in the Dutch in Netherlands. And when they came here, they had to translate because the generation is changing, and they want to move with the generation as well. What attracted me most greatly to this book, it was a material and the human story held within that object. This is not a clean copy, as you can see. It's not. To me, that matters greatly. It tells that the book was part of everyday life of Christian that period. It was held, it was opened, it was carried, it was read, it was sung, and they lived with that psalm. You could see that is the original copy, as you can see on the screen. The physical copy is, that weird evidence, copy, it shows that the book is being used for the purpose it was published for. As someone who has been trained in library and archive science, I find that especially very meaningful. Rare books are often presented to us today as very fragile treasures. Oh, don't touch it, caged somewhere. But before they became fragile, before they became protected objects, they were working objects that everybody uses. They serve community, they move through homes and churches, they gather traces of human contact. And the Morgan copy appears to preserve more of that lived material story and history than some other books, other copy that I saw. In the archives, I saw many others that they are very neat, they've been repacked, and also they've reprinted in one way or the other. But the Morgan copy still stands the historical usage, which I can see. The observation also took me to my experience as a librarian, as an archivist. And it reminds me of the Ranganathan law. Ranganathan is a library science professor in India and worldwide who devised 5 laws of library science. a fundamental frame that continues to influence how we think about books, readers, and also the library and archives today. Especially one of the principles that I want to bring out now is the book are for use. That statement may sound very simple, but this same book shows just how profoundly it really stated that the book are not just to be published and kept somewhere, they are for use. The Morgan copy was clearly a book for use. Its physical appearance reveals that history. At the same time, another fundamental law of library science is that every book its readers also comes alive here. In the 18th century, this devotional book was used for the Reformed worshiping community. Today, this same book that seems to be discarded and old becomes a source of historians, the archivists, librarians, theologians, researchers, and anyone interested in the life of book as cultural witnesses. Its readership has changed, but the ability to speak, to make impact, has not ended. Morgan copy raises an important question. What exactly are we preserving when we preserve books? Are we preserving the printed content alone, or are we preserving the physical evidence of use, ownership, and also of time? One of the strongest ways this copy also speaks to me is the inscription on it. I find it very difficult to read this, but I had to use machine and also with support of other people to be able to understand what is written there. These inscriptions demonstrate that the book was not just printed and circulated, but also personally owned and actively used. The name preserved on this volume connects it to the real historical users. One particular important inscription that I see here is that the book Peter Bow, January year 4th, 1773. As you can see on the screen there. The name is prominently written, also tied to New York, and the date, January 4th, 1773. Regardless of this date, which you can see on the screen, the date of ownership, it shows that this book was already in private hands, not only one, because I saw a lot of dates and names on the same book. The same book was being passed from one person to another. So it was privately used, and people used it for their religious experience. These inscriptions give the Morgan copy a unique human history of ownership and use. In addition, the names, the book contains phrases like, God give him grace therein, for God and honor the king, and learning is better than house and land. This word also very suggestive. They include that the book may have functioned not only for public worship, but also for private devotion, moral instructions, and perhaps for literacy practice. Fear God and honor the king, and also learning is better than the house. They indicate that the book may have functioned not only in public worship, but also in private devotions, moral instructions, perhaps literacy practice. For me, this is one of the reasons why the Morgan copy is especially valuable. Cleaner copies that I saw in the archives may preserve the text more neatly, but they may no longer preserve the same visible evidence of devotion, of identity, and also of survival. This copy allows us to move from the history of publication to the history of a person. Another thing I discovered in the book is discarded. Some of you were in academics, some of you may be a lecturer or archivist. When you see discarded on the book, what does that mean? The life of that book has ended. That bold discarded stamp had another layer to that story. And perhaps it is the mark that mostly caught my attention when I was studying this. It tells us that at some point, this book moved from being valued to being unwanted. It seems that it has passed from personal ownership into institutional possession, and then from institutional possession into discard. A personal user will not put discarded stamp on a book. Somebody owns the book first, then later the book went to the library or archives, and at the time they just saw it. Nobody's using this book again. Discarded. We may not know exactly why or when that happened, under which institution, though I could see HSRC. I went online search, I couldn't get any archives or library that has that name. But we can still do further study on that anyway. But even without these answers, the mark itself is powerful. It reminds us that the value of a book is never fixed. That is why I do not see the discarded stamp as a symbol of loss. I interpret that as a sign of afterlife. This book outlived the dismissal. It endures the threat of the disappearance. And now, in a very different context, it is once again being read, studied, interpreted, and valued. We are all here because of this book that was discarded many years ago. The journey from use to neglect to preservation is one of the strongest reasons this book matters today. It reminds us that preservation is not automatic. Cultural memory is fragile. The materials we inherit have often survived because someone, somewhere, choose to let that material stay and not vanish. And on this, we should give kudos to J. Michael Morgan and his partner for keeping this book for us today. This is where another law, Ranganathan law that I mentioned, comes to place again. That library is a growing organism. Also become deeply meaningful here. Growth in the library and archives is not only by collecting new materials, but also by rediscovering the significance of these materials. What I have come to appreciate about this book, this Morgan book, is that it teaches us that to use the book, to see the book as a text, not only as a text, but also as bibliographies. For example, biographies, book moves from time, through time. They pass through hands, they gather marks, they survive changing judgment about their value. Number two, they hold within them both printed meaning and human experience. Three, books are very important, especially this one. Is a small psalm book, as we know, but yet it brings together people for worship, translation, ownership, devotion, preservation, and survival in one object. It is a witness of religious life in the early New York. Another reason why this book matters, and what I discovered, it is a witness of movement from Dutch language to English in worship in the New York. It is also a witness of personal use and moral formation. It is a witness of discard and rediscover. That is why I believe this book is very, very important. It reminds us that old books are not silent leftover of the past. They speak through their texts, their forms, their inscriptions, their damage, and also their survival. And if we pay attention to this book, I will advise you, make sure you come and check the book again. They can also teach us that only about the world that produced them, but they also teach us that our own responsibility in the present year, that we have the responsibility to interpret, to preserve, and also to recognize value in the things that others may have overlooked. In closing, I want to appreciate once again the people that supported this. Dee, who is our coordinator, Emily, who has guided us from the Columbia, Elizabeth, I have Michael here, my boss here, and also the director of our library, Dr. Kelly Campbell, for this support. Thank you very much.